based in, live in the city in Melbourne in South Bank. We fell pregnant in April last year, and my wife was due on January the 4th this year. However, Christmas Eve, my wife started getting some tingly feelings and things like that. So we actually went out on Christmas Eve. We went out to Oakley. We actually went for a doctor's appointment in. There's a clinic in Melbourne she goes to, and the doctor was feeling around her stomach and saying, Beth's like, "Oh, I think I'm just having a Braxton Hicks," and she goes, "Well, it feels a little bit harder than that. Is it uncomfortable?" She said, "Yeah, it's uncomfortable." The doctor was, I think she's fairly confident we were going to have the baby within the next 48 hours, and we weren't. We were in denial, really. We really didn't want a baby born on Christmas Day, as you can imagine. Anyway, after that, we went and looked at some tiles for our new house that we're renovating at the moment, but we also went to Oakley and had some Greek coffee and some souvlaki's as well. And that's what my wife will say was the thing that kicked it all off. But anyway, it was that night. I went for a ride actually on that machine that afternoon when we got back, and Beth was in the shower and she said, "Oh, I think things are starting to happen." And I said, "Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay." I started doing some research, and they said the first initial signs, they could last a week. We should be fine. Nothing will happen. Anyway, that night she started getting a bit more and more uncomfortable. And then by the morning, she knew it was happening, and we knew it was happening. It was just biding our time to go forth from there. So she decided to bake a cake, as you do at 9 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Day when you're in labour. And I just sort of sat on the couch and shut myself a little bit and tried to just be composed for her. And as you may recall, Christmas Day was a particularly beautiful day. So after that, I think it was about midday, we decided to go to the beach, just in Elwood. Went to the beach and spent a couple of hours there and just ate watermelon. And I think Beth just went for a walk. And I'm looking back at the photos, you can tell she was ready to pop. She was pretty big. Anyway, it got to about 3 o'clock and she goes, "Oh, I'm getting uncomfortable. I think we need to go home." So we spent some more time at home, and she really started labouring at home then. And basically, I was there just to sort of support and help and massage wherever I could, and make sure that she had this playlist that she wanted played, and it was 4 particular songs. That was all, and I heard them for the next probably 24 hours. So I never want to listen to that again. It sort of makes me emotional when I listen to it. So that's another reason why I don't really want to listen to it again. I want to cry all the time. But anyway, we got to about, I think, 3 o'clock. I rang the hospital. Royal Women's was our hospital. So if anyone's going there, it's a great spot to have a baby, I guess. I called them and they said, "Let me listen to her." And basically the woman on the phone could listen from the contractions that Beth was having, just the voice, the noises she was making from her mouth, what stage she was at. So I found that particularly, insightful. And she said, "No, she's got ages. Don't worry about it." And anyway, Beth sort of saying, "What do we do?" And we kept going on, and the contractions started getting closer together. And I think they said when it was within 2 minutes, I think that was what they said, between 2 minutes, that's when you should call back again. And this was the third time I'd called that night. So I called them again at about 4:30, and she said, "Let me listen to her." And she was really wailing at that stage. And there's probably about 40 minutes in between each call. And the lovely lady's name was Sue. And we decided to drive into the Royal Women's at about 5 o'clock on Christmas Day. And there was another poor woman ahead of us, and she was obviously a single mother. She'd been labouring at home on her own, and then had to drive, was admitted herself to hospital, and she was trying to fill out the forms and having contractions at the same time. So that was particularly difficult, and I really tried to help her, but also try and help my wife at the same time. And yeah, when we got through there, we signed some forms, and they took us into a examination room. And the lady that was on the phone, Sue, she actually came and examined Beth, and she said, "You're only 3 centimetres dilated, and I think they need to be up to 5 or something like that centimetres before they admit you." And she said, "Now you have the option to go home, or you have the option to stay here." And Beth said, "I'm not fucking getting back in that car again. We're staying here." So we stayed there, and the lady said, "Just hang on in this observation room, and I'll come back for you shortly." And it felt like she'd been gone for hours, but it was probably only 20 minutes. But then my wife's water broke at that time, and I ran out and said, "You need to come back in." And anyway, from there, things started happening. And after that point, I think we were probably in that waiting room for maybe half an hour. they admitted us up to a suite upstairs. And we went in there, and basically, I think Eric has just provided me with a couple of prompting points here. And I think one of the main things that I was saying is what during the labour helped your partner the most. And I think I sort of caught an earshot of it just before. Basically find out exactly how your wife wants the room set up. So she's not going to want you to ask her, where do you want the candles and things like that. Basically ask her tonight, or ask her when you get the chance. Just say exactly how you want the room set up. So as soon as you go in, you know exactly what to do. The midwives will look after your wife for that time. You go in there and set the music up, set the candles up, set the purifier thing going. And that's one thing that you can do that can help, and it will occupy you for 10 minutes at least, while the midwives help out your wife. And that's something that I can say, hand on heart, is probably one of the greatest things I think I did at the time. But anyway, beyond that, I think we started settling into the contractions and the labour progressing, and we tried all different positions, sort of on the bed, leaning up against the bed. Beth desperately wanted to go into the bath, but they don't let you into the bath too soon, because I think there's a chance that it slows down the labour process. So they didn't let her jump into the bath straight away. So she battled a bit. They let her have a shower. So she was on all fours in the shower, and I had the shower head, and I was, running it across her back. And I think we were there for probably 3 hours. And I remember when the midwife came up and said, Beth, every 20 minutes, how are you going? How's everything going? And she asked me very quietly, she said, how are you going? And I said, I'm all right. And she goes, is there anything that hurts? I said, yeah, my back's a little bit sore. I said it quietly. And she goes, oh, it's okay, maybe we'll just shift positions. Because I've been standing there with a shower head on her back for 3 hours. And obviously I'm not going to complain about anything at all. But it was something just to keep in mind. And then beyond then, she sort of started to, and she really wanted to hop in the bath, so they chucked her in the bath, and they have to have it at about 37 degrees, I think, sort of body temperature. And when you're labouring, it's pretty warm, and she's had to keep getting in and out because it was so warm. And we'd probably gone in at 5 o'clock, and I think this was probably about 11. She started probably. I'll jump back. She went at about 10 o'clock. She said, I think I need an epidural. I can't do this. I need an epidural. I need to have it. The midwife said, yeah, we can organise that. There's a lot that we need to do. We need to get the anaesthetist. We need to, there's a few steps to go through. And my wife said, I want to go through those steps. And so the midwife trots off. She goes, no worries, I'll organise it. And she didn't come. She was gone for probably half an hour. And Beth said, you need to go out and make sure that I can get this epidural. So I went out, and she was on the computer just typing away. And I said, so can we organise this epidural a little bit quicker? It's taking quite a while. And she goes, yep, no worries, I can do it. And then I went back in, and about 10 minutes later, she came in, and Beth said, so about that epidural, I don't think I'm going to need it, because she transitioned into that next phase of the labour or the birthing process. So she sort of got over that point where she felt that the world was going to end and she needed the epidural desperately. And there's a point where they can't give you the epidural at a particular time. And I was glad. I was really great. It was great to see her get through that, because it was really hard for me to watch, because it's probably that's probably the most painful part, I think, is that particular section. Obviously the pushing is difficult, but I think that particular section where nothing is really happening, but the pain is so intense, that was difficult for me. But beyond that, she did need to start pushing, and she started pushing in the bath. And another thing I've written down here is another piece that you can do is, I was just making sure that I was present the whole time. So I think I went to the bathroom once, I think through the 6 or 7 hour period. I just nipped out to the toilet. But just being present and making sure that she's aware that you're there, and either it's by holding her hand or being up close to her head, that was something that she felt was really worthwhile and useful that I did. But also anything that midwife said, I basically repeated. And although it seems stupid or a bit idiotic, a bit repetitive, and it would be annoying, she actually found it a bit more powerful coming from me, particularly when she was pushing. So I think there's a few different ways of pushing, and when they get it right, the midwives can see, and they're like, that's the way we want you to push. And I just say, that's the way, go for it. That's a good one. That's the best one you've done so far. And that really resonated with her, hearing encouragement from me, rather than just the midwives. So she started pushing. She was probably pushing for a good hour. And I don't know if you guys have known, based on your birth classes, but after a good hour of pushing, they usually call for some form of intervention. The Royal Women's is a midwife-run hospital, but they have to get the doctors in if you've been pushing for longer than an hour. So the doctors came in, and Beth couldn't push much more. She was really, really knackered, and the doctors came in and said, "Look, we're going to have to vacuum, put the little vacuum disc on the baby's head, and we're doing an episiotomy as well." And at that point, Beth was really I'll step back as well. She had written a birth plan, and I think after I finished Beers and Bubs, I came home and said, change it to birth goals or birth preferences. Don't have it as a birth plan, because everything changes. So we made sure that it was just a list of preferences that she'd like, and not having an epidural, funnily enough, was one of them. She didn't want to have an epidural, even though she called for it. So I think she's pretty stoked that she didn't have it. But anyway, she made sure that birth preferences list, she wanted everyone to ask for her consent to move forward to doing the next procedure, or touching her, or doing something like that. So the Royal Women's, the ladies there were really willing to do so. And they asked about everything. And during the episiotomy, they made sure they asked every step of the way. And I think at that point, Beth was like, just get it out of me. I don't care what you do. And so the doctors came in, and I think at that point there, I felt relatively in control. However, as soon as that happens, you get about 3 or 4 more people just whip into the room, and things really start happening, and you start getting shimmied a little bit back. You're still there, but there's a lot more people in, there's a lot more commotion. And I think that was something that it started to get a little bit overwhelming for me. So making sure that you just repeat everything that the midwives say, not everything, but just the words of encouragement, and just help her through. My hands, I took a photo of my hands afterwards, and they were just ripped bare. There's cuts in my hand from when Beth was really gripping onto me. Mm-hmm. So during that particular time, the pushing is the part where they really grip onto you, and just make sure you've got your hand there for them to hold. At one stage, my hand wasn't there. I was doing something else. I think I was actually fiddling, getting my camera out ready, because I thought we were on. And she grabbed the midwife's hand and really gave it a good squeeze. And the midwives obviously have done it before, and they're prepared for it, but she felt really bad afterwards because she squeezed the midwife's hand and not mine. So that was pretty funny at the end. But anyway, after the episiotomy, everything happened really quickly. So it was probably within 20 minutes. And this was at the point, it was about quarter to midnight on Christmas Day. And the midwife said, "Do you want your baby born on Christmas Day or Boxing Day?" And I said, "Boxing Day. We want it Boxing Day. We don't want it Christmas Day." And the midwife said, "We can make that happen. Don't worry." And I didn't know whether that meant they're going to fudge the paperwork, or whether they're just going to slow it down somehow for it to happen. So funnily enough, it was 12:15, quarter past midnight is when she arrived. And that was great. I was thrilled that it was Boxing Day and not Christmas Day. We fell pregnant pretty quickly. So we didn't plan on having a baby right at this particular time, but it seemed to happen. That's just how the cookie crumbled for us, really. So Boxing Day, 12:15 a.m. she was born. She was brought up onto my wife's chest, and I think it was great. It was great for probably 5 minutes, but after that, you cut the cord if you want. You don't have to do it, but I didn't want to do it to start with. But when I was in the moment, they said, "Would you like to do it?" And I did it anyway. So just don't. You can't really make up your mind beforehand. Just see how you feel during the time, if you want to do it or not. After that, they took the baby and they weighed her, and I think Hollywood makes you feel that that's it. Like, you got your baby, you go home, or you go to the the rest up suite. But afterwards, particularly with the episiotomy, she lost quite a lot of blood, and then more people came in, and I got pushed back again further, and they really started having to work on her, because I think the placenta was still to come out, and there was a few things. She was bleeding quite a lot internally, and they had to really work on her. They were pushing quite heavily on her uterus at the time. And I've got a photo that's pretty full on. It's basically, the baby's on my wife's chest, but she's writhing in pain, because that's the next step. They've got to finalize all that, the stuff at the end. And I think that's probably more traumatic than the actual birth itself, from a spectator's point of view. I think anyway, it was just hard for me I wasn't next to her. I was probably 10 meters away from her, or 5 meters away from her. And there was probably 6 or 7 people working on her, and she was sucking on the gas, and she had the baby on top of her. And I think that was a point where that was where I was a bit overwhelmed. The rest of it is overwhelming, but that was a particularly overwhelming point. But that was our experience, the episiotomy and all that. She lost probably 1.5 liters of blood, I think, and that's quite a lot. So it sort of went from slow 0 to 100 in about half an hour. but that was a point. I think that's what they say: be prepared for everything. And we were tracking along pretty well. And it was just that last point where they said we think we're gonna have to get a doctor in, and then doctor comes in and they make all the decisions and go from there. So I think that was my experience. She was born on Boxing Day, 12:15 a.m. And she was great. We only had to stay at the hospital for a night. One thing, it was good that we're on Christmas Day, is because it wasn't that busy. There wasn't that many Christmas Day babies. Funnily enough, maybe people are smarter than us and they don't time it to have a baby on Christmas Day. But anyway, we got the chance to have the delivery suite for the remainder. I think it was till about 6 a.m. So they actually, I don't know, public health system, I guess. The midwife said, look, now here's the mat that your wife has been leaning on to give birth on. We'll just give it a quick spritz and we'll throw it on the ground and throw a sheet on it. You can have a sleep if you want. And usually I'd say, oh, no, I'll be okay. But I want to have a sleep. I went down and had a sleep for a good 4 hours in the delivery suite while my wife was up recovering on the bed, and the baby was being looked after by the midwives as well. So that was great in the public system to be able to stay the night, because at Royal Women's anyway, if you're in a shared room, which my wife was, beyond that, I have to go home and I can only come during visiting hours, which kind of sucks as a dad, but it was kind of a blessing in disguise for me, because I got to go home and have a good sleep and be prepared for 2 p.m. when I could come back and help out my wife. And funnily enough, at 6:58 a.m., I got caught at somewhere along Elizabeth Street by a traffic light doing 15 k's over the limit, and went through a red light at the same time. So I got hit with an $800 fine and 5 demerit points on the way home, which was a bit shit to come home to. But anyway, that was that happened. So I think on my 21st birthday, I'll be asking for the money off Avery, is her name, Avery Jane. So I'll be asking her for the money for that speeding ticket. I did try and dispute it, saying, come on guys, it was bloody Boxing Day. I come home from the birth of my child, and they said, well, you still were speeding and you still ran a red light. There's no excuses. So there's no compassion in the government police force at that point. But yeah, so that's basically how it happened. One thing I would recommend is that your wife might not like it, but try and take some photos when the baby's born. I'm a photographer, so I had a camera all ready to go, but I took some good photos of it, and she wasn't that thrilled with me doing it at the time, but she looked back on it probably within the months afterwards and just said, I'm so glad that you took these photos, because it's great for me to see. I remember it, but I don't remember it that well. So I didn't take any during the actual birthing process at the hospital. I took some in the labour, when we were having labour at home here. And then when the baby was born, straight away, I think she really appreciated that. In the long run, you might have to just go through you might yell at you a bit in the suite and just say, not smile for the camera, but just look at the camera, try and get one of her with the baby, because she'll thank you for it later. If it's, depending on your partner, I don't know, but that's something that Beth really liked and benefited from. So yeah, that's basically the story.
Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah.
I'm just curious there, Scott, about that moment of giving birth. I may have missed it, but I just wondered what it was like for you, that moment that, what's the name your baby came out?
Beth. Oh, Avery.
Beth.
Avery's the baby,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. Just that moment that Avery came out there, what was your...
for you? I don't know, because it was, I think because it wasn't, not necessarily, everything was natural, but it happened very quickly. Like it was, I think just when the doctors, she just came out so fast and just got plonked straight on my wife's chest. And I was pretty speechless, to be honest. And then I sort of resorted back to what I'm comfortable with. So I was there, I cried like a baby. And I got to cut the cord, and then I whipped the camera out quickly and started taking some photos. So that was that settled me a bit. And then I got to hold her for a good couple of minutes. And then while they were working on Beth, and then I think given she started losing a lot of blood, they said, you need to stand to the side and we need to work on her, and we'll take the baby from here. So it was great, overwhelming, emotional. It was brief. But yeah, after that, it was great. So yeah, I probably was pretty speechless, to be honest, and cried like I hadn't cried before.
When did you get to really kind of be in a more slow moment of really seeing her then, like to look into her eyes and really start to feel like you're like, whoa, you're my kid?
Yeah, I think it was probably, given we'd given birth at sort of midnight, it wasn't until about 2 a.m. that we're all sort of settled, and the baby was sleeping, and I got to look at her then. But I was, Beth in particular, but I was particularly knackered at the time. And the midwife said, look, if you just want to have a lie down, and we'll look after the baby. And I probably jumped a little bit too quickly at the opportunity. I said, I'd love to have a sleep. So I had a quick kip on the ground. And I think it probably wasn't until I woke up and had to leave at about 7 a.m. was when I realized. And then on the drive home, when I got my speeding ticket, it's spinning around in your head, and you think, shit, this is like the last time I'll be at home, like without a child, on my own, kind of I'm a dad, but I'm not a dad because I've got one sort of afternoon here. And I think that was that really shifted for me. It was that life stage twist. It spun up in my head quite a lot. And it's not as, I had all doom and gloom in my head at that point, because I was overwhelmed. I was happy. I was sad. I was every emotion you could think of. And I thought, this is the end of my current life and I'm moving on to another one. But it's not. It's just sort of a shift, basically. Yeah.
Wow. And I really want to acknowledge that that's so often true. Like, the birth process can be long and challenging and amazing. And often women and men might say, I just feel relief. Yes. Sometimes there's an incredible euphoria, and other times everyone's exhausted and just sleep. And slowly over time, as we've talked about, that being the guardian of the birth space, keeping that little love bubble with you guys going wherever you can, with whatever circumstances you've got going on, helps to nurture that feeling of, wow, we're actually your mine, and we're going to grow, we're starting our family life here. Yeah, wow,
it's a great story, Scott. I really enjoyed hearing that. You share it with a lot of clarity, but a lot of feeling to it. And I was particularly struck that last bit of the transition, the piece you talked about there, transitioning into becoming a father. And I think that's a really important point around, that's not the same beforehand, and the opportunity of that presents. And we're also going to touch on afterwards, in not long, around dealing with pain. And I think there are some great examples there around holding the shower for hours. 3 hours is a marathon stint on the shower head. But we'll be touching on to the other guys around pain management in that way. There was a question from someone, Tom, I think it was, had a question there.
Sorry, I just posted in the chat. I thought you might ask it, but what's the epis? Sorry, I can't even pronounce it now. What's that?
I'll probably let the professionals explain it.
As the baby descends, if there's a need to make a cut into the perineum, which is the very, very stretchy muscle between the vagina and the anus, then there's a cut made, and it tends to come to the side of the bottom of the vagina, so bottom right, and it can just aid the space for the baby to come through. So cool. It is a little bit deeper cut than the mother would naturally tear, but it can be necessary to help that baby come through if there's concerns of fetal distress.
So it can also mean, I believe, that it's there can be some pain, of course, for after the birth as well. So there can be a little bit more time to recuperate.
The recovery was a bit longer, and I think we got home and we had about 3 days here at home. And my wife, it's funny, given this coronavirus pandemic, she's like, I'm going stir crazy at home. After 3 days, I want to go for a walk. And we live just near the South Melbourne market, so we walked maybe 600 meters to the market, and she really shouldn't have. It was pretty painful for her. So
that's hard to imagine, considering she lost 1.5 liters of blood. Wow. Yeah, hear that.
So Scott, the other piece just the other part of your story was talking about the placenta and the kind of what we call like the second birth, and how that can also be not always so straightforward. Ideally that also comes out as it has to have contractions to bring that out, but it's sometimes there can be complications. It happened in our birth of our first child and took quite a long time for that for the placenta to come out. So, something I didn't know that when I was becoming a dad, that was even part of the
I didn't
things.
know
So,
that.
so just that was a good preparation thing. It's like, oh yeah, the baby's out. Oh, and now the placenta has to come out too.
Yeah,
so
and I think
just a good thing to
I think
know.
the baby being born obviously is a distraction because you've got the baby and you're there with your partner, but they're still, the staff are still working and they're still doing things. But yeah, it was. I think it was a little bit different for me in the sense that she lost so much blood, and I really got pushed to the back, and I could see her being worked on. Whereas I don't know whether normal or other circumstances whether you'd be there just with the baby, you two, and it would all happen naturally. I would have thought, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think, I'm wondering why you got pushed aside as opposed to be right by her. And
it was just a sheer amount of, there was probably 8 people in the room, I think. And I was at the top end and it was kind of a bit awkward for them that, I don't know, and I think I probably said, look, I'm in your way. I'll just stand back a bit. And I just kept saying, I'm reassuring Beth that I was there.
Yeah, you do your best you can when you've got a true emergency, and that's what it was. And do what you can to stay as close. You might be the one to hold the baby while work is done on your partner. And sometimes it can be really hard to know where to be. So, I can imagine that was really challenging for you to be witnessing her and wondering, is she going to be okay?
Exactly. And I think, I come from a medical family, so I sort of know, it's not new to me, kind of, medical emergency. I heard about it a lot from my parents, but it was just being in there and just seeing the sheer amount of people that had to come in, and every one of them had a role, but it was all on Beth's. One was putting a drip in, I think she had a drip in both arms, and someone was holding the gas, and another person was on the computer, and a doctor and a couple of, like, an obstetrician as well down the bottom end. So it was got pretty full on pretty quickly, and I think I wasn't prepared for it, and I think that's probably why when I was speeding home, I was, crying in the car because I'd been through that. The life transition change sort of hit me a little bit.
Thank you for your honesty and just sharing that vulnerability and how extreme those feelings can be in all of that. By this time, you've obviously had you did get a little bit of sleep that night, but you'd gone the whole night before as well with scattered sleep, or did you sleep through, or what was
the night before? Beth got up at 2 a.m. to have a bath, and I woke up at the time, and I knew that she wouldn't have a bath at 2 a.m. normally, so I knew something was up. So I was probably up and down beyond then, thinking, I'm sort of started spinning in my head that something was happening.
So you do really need to be prepared for 24 hours where you're probably not getting much sleep, and imagining that all those strategies for physical comforts and support, as well as emotional presence, as well as your efforts to try to be an advocate, are all happening. It's a big call to imagine all of that in your role, and that's why that preparation now and those conversations and looking around what each other's expectations are and where can you meet them and where might there be a gap, like how do we work with those possibilities is all really helpful.
One other thing I would recommend is make sure you have some bloody food. We went to the beach, as I said, and my wife prepared for us chicken sandwiches at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't touch them, and then I hoed into them at sort of 11 o'clock at night. So if you can have something, make sure you have something to eat, and make sure she only ate watermelon for the day. That was all she ate. So make sure that she's got the energy as well. Although she's got all the hormones kicking in to help her get through it, make sure you've got some tucker to get stuck into quickly while you're in the suite at some stage, because you run out of energy pretty quickly, even as a partner.
So that's a good point there, Scott, that it's okay to look after your own well-being, like to be a support person in such an intensive way. To remember to get little moments of just even resting yourself if you can, but keeping up your fuel, making sure you've got that. And the preparation bag, you didn't say so much about that, but anyone's done the birth preparation classes, you probably have talked about preparation bags and getting things kind of ready, remembering what to pack. And has anyone talked about that or thought about that as part of preparation? Rowan has? Yeah. So it's a good thing just to remember about that.
Can I ask about food? I mean, in terms of your partner eating, if labor, if contractions have begun, can you still eat? How late can you eat? Like in terms of keeping strength up, I suppose what is the guidance about how late to eat or what to eat, what not to eat?
Yeah, the suggestion is you do try to kind of keep eating until she really doesn't want to.
Right.
You're not eating a steak. You're eating
No
easy carbs that are going to give you reasonably quick access to energy. A banana, porridge, honey on toast, last night's leftover pasta. And as the labor progresses, as it goes into strong active labor where contractions are a good minute long and they're coming every 2 to 3 minutes and she's really kind of deep in, then she's probably not going to manage to even want to chew, but she might eat a banana, 2 fruits, jellies, coconut water, Gatorade, icy pole, that sort of thing. So there's a sort of an ongoing release of some kind of energy going in for output. And like watermelon's a great idea. It's watery, a little bit sweet.
That was all she had for the day. I think one thing that you would have learned in your birth classes anyway. It takes it's a long process. As I said, she started feeling funny on Christmas Eve, and and then it wasn't until Boxing Day she was born. So you will have perhaps a little bit of time, maybe a couple of hours, where it's not too intense. For her pain-wise, and where you have to be fully present. Maybe you can duck down to the supermarket or duck somewhere, make something quickly, and then you can have that in the evening or wherever your baby's born.
As a doula, I always have a Snickers bar, an apple, some muesli bars, which I'm getting pretty sick of at birth. Yeah. But I still have them because they're easy to get to. I often bring a leftover dinner, double bag it so she's not smelling it too much. I want to make sure I've got energy, or else I'm not going to have the same mental focus. So it is worth taking care of yourself. And like you said about being in the shower, changing position, like you can do that, and you can ask the midwife, can you stay with her while I duck out and quickly, even if you're just like, breathe air, quickly call a friend and get back in if you had to. Like, if it's hard for you, take care of you so you can come back and stay, have energy that has confidence in her. So if she looks up at you, you're there ready to meet her eyes. Yeah. Did you guys have other questions? Thoughts ever come up, or just something you want to share back?
Not so much like questions, but thanks, Scott. That was really insightful. I enjoyed that. Particularly like the little bit about the not to be too worried about being repetitive, because that's something that I have been anxious is the wrong word, but sitting there going, I need to come up with 24 hours of material here to and you don't want to say the same thing twice, otherwise she'll snap at you or not.
And I guess if she does snap at you, mate, who cares? Like, not who cares, but she's going to snap at you anyway. So
exactly. And then the other probably part for me is the bit before you get to the hospital, and it from what I've what you've said and what I've read, it can be quite a long time, and I guess that's probably the part of it that I'm most anxious about, almost, because like I feel like when you get to the hospital, there'll be someone there to tell you what to do, what are we doing now, whereas beforehand you kind of like, oh, should we be going, should we not, I don't know what to do.
Just ring them. Make sure you ring them, and get them to listen to her, or at least describe what she's going through, and they'll hold you off as long as you can, because the worst thing is you don't want to be turned around and sent back home again. The car ride's hard enough as it is.
Very much.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. It's Tom here. I thought that was awesome, mate. Really, really enjoyed it. Lots of like practical tips that hadn't even really thought of. I know I'm not due for a while. A lot of the guys on the call are a lot sooner, but like even taking diffusers in and like little things like that. Well,
just ask her what she would like, and then if you can you set that up, you be in control of that, then she'll thank you for it later.
It's one thing you can control, like
exactly.
in a situation where you don't have control over it much, it's one thing you can do, like, which I thought was really good. I'm keen just to hear like how you're adjusting, like probably that's for me. I don't know the other guys on the call, but like I'm a bit nervous as to like how much life's going to change you know, and like probably not really feeling prepared, you know, like not a lot of my mates have kids, you know, and like going from being able to do what you want to getting maybe only a few hours on a weekend to yourself to do something, if that, you know, like how have you found that transition?
Well, I've got, you know, obviously I've got a couple of groups of mates, and I've got two particular mates that have got kids. They're older than me, but most of my core friends don't. I'm the first to have a child, and you know, I'd go down on a Friday night and have beers with them most Fridays, or sometimes on Saturday, and I'd go on Saturday morning. I'd go riding on that thing for 6 hours, like 100 k's or so, and I'd do that most Saturdays. But I think also it's particularly unique time because we're all in lockdown anyway, so I'm kind of stuck here. So I'm probably not the best person to ask, but the first you know, it was a big adjustment for the first couple of weeks, because your baby is like a little an alien kind of thing. It's you sort of you don't necessarily know what to do, but you learn very quickly. And I guess to show some more transparency and honesty, it probably took me a good couple of months to really bond with Avery. Like I know mothers bond more quickly because I guess they essentially grow the baby, and then as soon as they have this sort of innate bond with them that's sort of not necessarily easily explained. But it took me a while to bond with Avery, and I have certainly now, and it actually has helped because I work from home every day and I get to see her quite a lot. But the shift is, I think you welcome it more than you think you will, if that makes sense. Basically, it is difficult, and you lose the thing. You can't just go and do whatever you want to do. Like even just playing PlayStation, I'd love to do that if I could, but you know, the bub shouldn't be watching screens and things like that. So I can't just flick that on, but I think you welcome it with more open arms than you think. So it's probably not until you get into it that you'll know how you might be anxious about it now, but and I certainly was as well. As I said, I bawled my eyes out on the way home thinking it's the end of my life, but it isn't. Don't take that as gospel, but yeah, I think you'll experience it in your own way, and hopefully your mates catch up and have a baby as well soon.
Cool. Thanks, mate.
And Rowan, you had something you also wanted to share or reflect.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thanks, Scott. That was great. Like you sharing your story like that, so detailed. No, it's great to hear that. Speaking to close mates, they might not be quite as open because you obviously know the partner and stuff. So it's good to have someone that you don't explain how it all works. The question I had was around: was there anything you were doing or saying that your partners reflected on, saying was really, really good during the birth? Like at the time, might not have realised it, but on reflection, things you were saying, were you being positive? Were you how were you basically being as you were going through that process, especially as it got harder at the hospital?
Yeah, I think I certainly went in. I sort of said to myself, I wasn't going to ask her any questions. Like, I sort of said to myself, I'm not going to ask her anything. I really tried. I probably did in hindsight. I can't recall, but I didn't want to be asking her things like, are you comfortable lying here? Of course, she's not comfortable in any position. So she's never going to say, yes, I'm comfortable. So I think the words of encouragement saying you're doing well, I think when she had the epidural, when she wanted the epidural, she said, I can't do this. And the midwife said, but you are like, you're doing it. Like you're in the middle of, you are doing it. And I sort of repeated that and said, yeah, you're doing it. And I think coming from me, it was more powerful than coming from the midwife. And particularly at the pushing point when she started pushing, and the ones that, you know, she struggled a little bit on some of them, but the ones that she did really quite well on, the midwife said, that's the one we want. And I said, yeah, that's the one, that's a good one. And I think she responded quite well to that. And I think upon reflection, that's something that, was good for her.
Right,
yeah, you. A lot of dads, when mum's pushing, if she's like that over the bed, your partner might have been on her back if she'd had an episiotomy. But if you're on the side, you can hold her hand here and be whispering in her ear and be close and giving her water and wiping her brow. And then you can be looking, or not, you know, but you can kind of go both ways. And you can, when you see a little bit more the baby coming and you say, I can see more of the baby, you know, our baby, that's super encouraging. She can literally forget she's having a baby.
Exactly.
She's so big in the feelings that she forgets. So like you're saying, reminding her, our baby's closer, you're doing really well, we're going to meet our baby soon, and reminding her of that really helpful.
And it might sound like a sort of a shallow comment because, of course, you're having a baby, but I think and of course she's doing well, but as long as she can hear that and hear it reinforced from you as someone who's her partner or close to her, then I think that's important.
Yeah, thank you. Good question, everyone. Yeah.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for sharing your story. I also have a question.
Yep.
Was there any moment where during the process where you felt somewhat lost or uncertain of what to do, or not really in their focus on what's happening?
When I was driving to the hospital and getting lost and not remembering where to go, that was one thing. But no, I did feel lost at times. Of course I did, because the whole thing was new to me. But I think making sure, not conveying that onto your partner is probably the best thing. Like, you can be lost and just ask the midwives for any advice when you're there. Maybe you don't necessarily let your partner hear that, but if you're feeling lost, I'd recommend probably asking the midwife for anything that you need, or try and figure it out yourself to start with. Don't ask your wife about it. So I think, there was particular points. I think more positioning, asking like, would you like to go to the bath now, or is this position working like it? I felt a little bit lost and a bit helpless at those times, because you're literally there. You feel helpless because you're not necessarily doing anything. But I think, leaning on the midwives, they know exactly what to do. And I think if you can follow their advice but listen to your partner and tend to her needs and sort of mesh in the middle, then I think you'll be fine.
Nicely said. Yeah. James.
I've got a question. Awesome. Scott, that was awesome again, like probably rephrasing what other people said, but really good stuff. I've got a question to ask you. How long did it take you, obviously having the child, how long did it take you to get into a routine again, from back to, and I know I might, to not so much normal life, but just a sort of a routine. I imagine for the first day or two, or coming back from the hospital, it can be quite stressful and things are different and so forth. Was there ever a time where a routine sort of happened?
Basically, she's 5 months old this week, and she's in a pretty strong routine at the moment. But when we got home, because they're newborns, they sleep all the time, and that's great. But there is routine probably starts to kick in because you've got visitors coming over. I don't know about the current. I guess you can have visitors at the current time, but your routine probably, it's when you go back to work. I think that will be when your routine will need to kick in, at least. So whether you prepare for that or whether just you going to work starts the routine. As I said, newborns sleep a lot, and there's no real set times kind of thing. So once they figure out their rhythm is when you get into routine, and particularly when you're forced into routine by going to work. I had about 2 weeks off for work, but given she was born at Christmas time, I had a month in total because I got sort of the 2 weeks off over Christmas, but then I got an extra 2 weeks paternity leave. So I was probably lucky in that instance. I don't know what you guys are getting work-wise, but I only had 2 weeks if she was born any regular time. So I was lucky to have that month. So we were a bit lucky in the sense that we could figure out a routine. But I'd say within the first 3 weeks, you'll eventually start ticking along.
Yeah. On that note, it is really worthwhile having conversations with your employer around parental leave. How, work and flexi time. Like, what are your options? What can you negotiate? What can you create if it's not existing in a way that really gives you much choice? Because, like you say, Scott, it is a whole new world. The baby is the manual that you're getting to learn. And so the more time you have with your baby and the more you do with your baby and support your partner, the more you're going to be able to bond and connect and be helpful and help. As you say, for your own sleeping as well as for, the family. And, one thing that's really going to shift that, the equality of who does what after a birth is if dads actually can have some more choice around how much they can stay at home And no dad seems to ever say, gee, I'm glad I got back to work a week later. They're almost all wishing they had more time than they got. So you might have choices now. I would explore it, find out what's possible, find out what you can, new policies you might be able to bring in to support your experience of becoming a father. Yeah.
And if you need to get some other advice around that, actually I can't remember her name now, but last year at the Fatherhood Symposium, so there was an expert person talking around parental leave. So that could be some resource that we could supply, Erica.
Yeah, and Women's Health Victoria have a lot of training and support as well. Yep. And I've got other resources too. Yeah. And just a couple of things that you mentioned in your story that I just wanted to sort of check in for the guys. The pushing stage, that it can be a little bit rushed in a hospital setting. It can be that there's a bit of a limit to it, but in the end, ultimately, it's if the mother's okay and the baby's okay, it can be allowed to take the time it does, and that can be even up to 3 hours. And that may not be what the mother can do or wants to do or is possible, because maybe there are other indications, but just the variation can be from a few pushes to a few hours and anything in between. So just to be aware that that's a variable as opposed to, it's not quite like in Hollywood where it's all just happens all at once. It can be a lot slower than you think. Yeah. Any other questions for Scott?
Yeah. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Erica. And Scott, yeah, absolutely. That was fantastic and really painted a picture of that journey, which is outstanding. So thank you very much for sharing it. So articulate in your delivery. I think just of getting to that point, then when, for me, I want to know when you went back to the hospital and when time was up and Mama was well and Bubba, and you got in the car and went home, and what that car journey was like. Different to going in and then going to your place of residence and being like, wow, what was there that you needed, or what did you go, oh fuck, I forgot I needed that to be set up. I was thinking about the birth suite more so about home, if that is something that happened.
Of course. Probably the most nervous car ride home I've ever had. It's funny now because I get in trouble for speeding a little bit too much by my wife when we're driving around. She goes, remember you got a baby in the back? But yeah, it was a particularly nervous ride home. We got home and I think we just sort of sat there and thought, okay, what do we do? Let's crack on, I guess. Beth would feed her a lot and as I said, she slept a lot. But I think one of the things you'll do, and you yourself or your partner might do it, and when they get into nesting mode before the baby's born, they'll likely buy a lot of things, and you'll notice that you'll get so much clothing as gifts as well. But also, I think the main thing is maybe cook some spaghetti bolognese, have some food in the freezer before just close to when she's due, because that's the thing. Either get people to bring food over when you're at home, or just have some in the freezer, because it's easy, because although they sleep a lot, you're not really in the mood to be cooking. So for those first couple of weeks, that would be one thing for me. I really like eating. So make sure you've got food in the fridge.
Good plan.
Yeah.
Postnatal plan for your first 6 weeks is so important. Like, scrap the agenda and just imagine you're going to be hunkered at home for 6 weeks, and that the more you can prepare with food and other people doing things for you, the easier it'll be. Because babies sleep a lot, but they want to feed at least eight times a day, 24 hours. Like, your whole world is this, just day and night all merges together, and you get these pockets of sleep throughout this 24-hour period. And that's cool that you say, Scott, when you go to work you do end up getting some routine back, but it can take time for a baby to know what's night and day, and the supply and demand of the amount the baby needs for feeding all can take time. And if you can give the baby and your relationship time to get to know each other, then you will get that routine eventually. But the first 6 weeks can be very blurry.
It is, and I mean, I don't know if any of you guys are like me. I'm a pretty deep sleeper, so Avery slept in our room. It was last night was the first night she slept outside of our room and in the other room. So she's 5 months old, so she's been in our room for a long period of time. And I'm lucky in the sense that I don't really wake up too much as my wife probably doesn't enjoy it. That when she's crying, I can't really. I don't know. I don't wake up only occasionally, so it's okay for me. I seem to sleep all right, but I certainly see it takes a toll on your partner. So. Particularly in those first weeks when they're up a lot, because they don't sleep through the night in the first few weeks because they feed so often. Just be caring and make a cup of tea when you can, and make breakfast and do what you can. Do a lot of washing.
I think, Scott, there's 3 points there just to pick up briefly. One is the preparation point around like car seats, getting those organised in advance, knowing how to fix them is a really good thing. So give a practice run at that. And then I've forgotten the second one, but the third one there is around sleep. Everyone has different relationships to sleep. So, I think that's a good point about how do we deal with sleep, if someone does have sleep deprivation as well. But I think essentially there is dealing with some of the added stress that can come from that, from whether it's your partner or yourself. So that's a good thing to work out how you're going to kind of work with sleep deprivation, if that's the case. Not for you, Scott, but maybe for others.
I'm lucky, I think. And one point I will make, Paul, is try not to buy everything before the baby comes, because you'll end up with a capsule for your car seat, which you do not need. You just need the car seat's fine. You just pull the baby out and put it in the pram. You don't, just because some of them will pull a capsule out of the car and then put it into a pram. It's probably easier to just pull the baby out and put her into the pram. So try not to buy everything before the baby's born, because you'll end up figuring out what you need, and you can get it online within 2 days. Like, otherwise you end up, spending thousands on things that you may only use once or twice. And then, so obviously have the essentials and the basics, but some of those fancy things you can probably hold out until you realize whether you need it or not.
Good point.
Cheers,
yeah, and remember that support services make a big difference to physical and mental well-being. Yeah. It might be worth paying for a cleaner, or it might be worth paying for Coles online to deliver. It might be worth paying for a lactation consultant who's a specialist for breastfeeding who comes to your house, or a postnatal doula who'll come and do a few hours of emotional and practical home support. So all of those things are potential financial investments that might be more, valuable than more stuff or more expensive stuff. But, just think about the budget and where that, and massages, recovery. All of those things can be a really significant way of, helping everyone feel a little more human again over time. Yeah, good.
I just remember the second point there I forgot before was about asking for help, like interrupting that more traditional male thing of not asking for help. And I think your prompt there around dinners being cooked or whatever you need there is a good reminder of, like, to get in that habit of going, it's okay as a dad to say, this is what we need, or this is what I need, and to put that out there. Because it's not something we...
Totally. I mean, you'll have so many people will ask politely to say, what can I bring? What can I bring? And actually say, do you mind knocking up a chicken madras or something, a nice curry and bringing that over?
People feel so important when they help a family with a baby. They feel like they're a part of new life energy. And most people, almost everyone, is excited to help. So totally. What goes around comes around. I'm sure you're going to help someone with a meal sometime. So absolutely say yes.
Of course.
Yeah. And protect that home space, because sometimes you've got a lot of family or friends who have expectations around coming around. And if they're not actually particularly helpful people, then it's going to probably fall on you to be a bit clear around the boundaries of who comes in and how long they stay and what they're there for. Because if your partner needs to sleep in the afternoon rather than entertain, that's significantly more important. And that can be something, again, where you're guarding the birth, the family space like you did beforehand. So just be aware of that, and have conversations ahead of time of what maybe the expectations are of family, in case there could be challenges there, because it'd be easy to do before the baby's born. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you so much, Scott. We'll allow a bit of time for just a bit more of some of the content that we normally like to get through.
Of course.
You have layered into all of that so nicely. So thank you.
Great. I must have learned from the best.
Take care.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
No worries.
Thank you.